years. The first one was to create the ESMO magnitude of clinical benefit scale working group. You are very familiar with that, and Elizabeth de Vries is going to be presenting later on the new version and the main remarks of the new version that we have. Also, we are working in the concept of access to cancer medicines, and not only for those that are innovative, that are very expensive, this is a huge problem, but also for those drugs that are essential. Essential drugs are not available in many countries, and we think that it's really very important to discuss all these aspects about the shortage of drugs and how to provide solutions to our policymakers and other stakeholders. Also, we are very devoted to keep our cancer care sustainable in the different health systems, and this is something that we are very much discussing with several stakeholders. And finally, some main concepts that we were discussing today, we truly believe that in order to get better control of cancer, actually we have to improve our research. And more we need independent research. This is really a huge problem because the funding for independent academic research has been reduced, globally speaking, during the last years, and we are actively lobbying to our public policymakers to think about this, because the only way to promote a better care is conducting academic research in different aspects. Not only, I'm not talking about only therapeutic research, but also, especially importantly, epidemiological research and primary prevention research. So basically, as mentioned before, we are fully devoted to this public policy area. Magnitude of clinical benefit scale, we had version 1.0. In this meeting, we have released the version 1.1. This is going to be characterized in detail by the next speakers. Also, very importantly, we contributed very actively to the new cancer, to the new WHO cancer resolution. We participated on that, and obviously we support it, and we are very happy that this has been released. Also, we have, in terms of sustainability, a very active position on biosimilars. We wrote a position paper at the beginning of the year that has been, that it's available in an open access journal, our open access journal, ESMO Open. It has been highly cited so far, downloaded, but more importantly, we are promoting all the policy on biosimilars at different levels. So in this particular regard, actually we had here, probably you are aware, a session on biosimilars that was attended by more than 700 persons, and this is really very important. So more and more we need education, we need the dissemination on how important biosimilars are if they are properly registered, and this is going to continue in the next meetings and in the next congresses. As mentioned, in order to promote academic research, it's very important to have all the stakeholders that promote this research in the European level altogether. And with this regard, ESMO contributed with the European Organization for Cancer Research and Treatment, EURTC, as well the European Association for Cancer Research, EACR, to create CARE4. Basically, CARE4, it's a platform that has promoted academic research, independent academic research, and this is something that we have also lobbied to different stakeholders. And finally, but not least, last but not least, one of the aspects on our cancer medicines working group was to promote the access to the essential medicines. And for this, it was really very important to make awareness of the problem of cancer shortage. This is really an important problem, not only in cancer medicine, it's also an important problem in other areas of diseases like pediatrics, like cardiovascular and neurological diseases, but especially in cancer medicines, the problem is becoming more and more frequent, and so far, usually the problems of shortage have been solved by the hospital pharmacies. But now this has come to a situation that it's going to be out of the potential solution within the hospitals. And this is something that we are working as well, promoting our paper, our manuscript that we did in collaboration with the European the Economist Intelligence Unit, promoting the awareness of this situation at different local levels with the policymakers, and especially in the European Union and the European Parliament. So this is the summary of what we are going to have today. And now it's my pleasure to introduce the first speaker, Elisabeth de Vries. As mentioned before, she's from Groningen, but for ESMO, she's the chair of the ESMO Magnitude of Clinical Benefit Scale Working Group. Thank you, Elisabeth.
Thank you. So the scale uses a standardized, generic, validated approach to stratify the magnitude of clinical benefit that can be anticipated from anti-cancer therapies. The first version was published in May 2015, so it's now a 2-year-old toddler. And really its aims were to address the critical public policy issue of value in cancer care, to help frame the appropriate use of limited public and personal resources, and to deliver cost-effective and affordable cancer care. Now, since 2016, these all new drugs approved by EMA are scored when they are approved for solid tumors, and they are incorporated in the ESMO clinical practice guidelines. And if there is not yet a new guideline, then e-updates are written and are available on the web and are sent to the members of ESMO. Now, you realize that the cancer world is at the moment extremely dynamic, and that also means that this tool has to be dynamic. And that's also why we have just released version 1.1. So in case you want to know more about version 1.1, you can go to the website of ESMO, and we have a special room for the ESMO magnitude of clinical benefit scale. You can find presentations there, the forms, as well as the paper. The reason to revise version 1.0 was that we only scored comparative studies, while EMA at the moment also approves drugs based on single-arm studies. We got feedback from clinicians and industry, and we had active internal peer review. We rewrote this tool. We did field testing. We again had a lot of peer review, and that's how we came up with the new version. In total, there are 9 revisions. What is a very important revision is that we now can score single-arm studies in orphan diseases and for diseases with a high unmet need. We were very interested to learn what the awareness and utilization of the tool was. So we did a survey, and we learned that the tool is not only used in Europe, but really worldwide. And it's not only used to derive the magnitude of clinical benefit of medicines, but people also use the tool to train fellows, to interpret data from clinical trials, in journal club discussions about the efficacy of new treatments, by doctors to assist them in decision-making, and to help doctors to explain the magnitude of benefit of medicines to patients. And with this, I would like to finish. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elisabeth. I didn't mention at the beginning that at the end, obviously, we'll have time for all the questions that you may have, right? And at the end, actually, even we have more time than the schedule, that the originally scheduled. So we'll be happy to take any questions that you may have. So now it's my pleasure to introduce Alex Eniu, who is the next speaker, and he's going to discuss and put in perspective all the clinical, all the presentations and discussions about the WHO Cancer Resolution and the ESMO Neoplastic Medicine Survey. He acts as a ESMO official, as a Global Policy Committee Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Josep. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm looking forward to your questions after these presentations. I'm a medical oncologist practicing in Central Eastern Europe, and so we have been facing issues of shortages of medicines, but there was no clear data on what the magnitude of that issue is. And that's why ESMO decided to conduct a survey looking at the availability of medicine drugs across Europe and then globally. We did this survey in 2 steps, and the results for the first step was to look at the European data, and then we expanded the survey globally to really see and understand what drugs are available and what not for treating solid cancers. So the data for the European survey has already been published in 2015, and the global data is in press and will be published soon. You can get a lot of information on the surveys from our website. What I'm showing you on these slides are the main conclusions of our evaluation, and that is that shortages affect several medicines in Europe and in fact globally, which means basically essential medicines that are needed to treat and cure cancer patients are not there. These medicines are needed to be delivered to most cancer patients, and they are not expensive. They are very inexpensive. So this is not an issue of cost. This is an issue of, as I'm going to show you, different mechanisms that lead to shortages of these medicines. Greater awareness is needed, and whenever I talk about this issue, we are surprised that politicians, the media, does not know much about it. So I think greater awareness is needed because these shortages affect the life of many patients. So what are the main things that ESMO did after understanding and publishing data on what the dimension of the problem is? Was we focused on 2 areas. In the global arena, and the survey, as I've mentioned, has been done in collaboration with the WHO. So on the global arena, we've worked hard with the WHO in different areas, but now is the time to talk about the WHA, the World Health Assembly Cancer Resolution. You may or may not know that this cancer resolution was passed in May this year. This was an extremely important event for cancer in general. It fills the gap in the WHO Global Action Plan for Non-Communicable Disease, and what it brings new is that it addresses cancer treatment, care, and prevention, and there are specific things that are required from the member states, and there are specific things that the WHO would have to deliver in order to comply with the recommendations of with the mandate that they receive from the cancer resolution. So this really means it is prime time now to really change a little bit the things in the cancer field, and there is the political will and the need to do this. So as a consequence of our involvement, we've supported this resolution, and we've also supported the update of the WHO essential list. We are working with them on having an assessment of the workforce to try to understand what are the differences and what would be the gap between the needed specialists for the tsunami of cancer cases that is heading towards us. So that is at the global level. In terms of looking at what can we practically do in the European Union, I think a very important step forward was to try to raise this into the attention of the politicians, and we've been able to have an event at the Strasbourg Parliament supported by 3 members of the European Parliament, as you can see here, which was a very successful event in putting this subject, shortage of inexpensive essential medicines, on the agenda. Moreover, we've looked, as I've mentioned, at the causes for these medicine shortages, and we've been able to work together with the Economist Intelligence Unit and issued this report, Cancer Medicine Shortages in Europe, Policy Recommendations to Prevent and Manage Shortages. You have here a short list of 6 recommendations to address shortages. This document can be found on the website of our society, the European Society for Medical Oncology, and also on the Economist Unit website. 6 recommendations: legislation for early notification of medicine shortages, strategic plans. You have to plan ahead to prevent rather than deal with medicine shortages. Countries have to develop catalogs of shortages and maintain essential medicine lists that are continuously assessed for the risk for shortages. There are also recommendations to provide incentives to the pharma industry for production infrastructure and improvements, because that is one of the issues, and to also improve the procurement models to prevent medicine shortages. So I guess this shows you just a little bit what we've been doing in terms of global policy and European policy, and I will stop there, and I'm looking forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alex. Now the final speaker is going to be Rosa Giuliani, who is a member of the ESMO EU Policy Committee, as well as the Cancer Medicines Working Group, and she's going to present our position, the position of our society on biosimilars.
So, good afternoon. You have already heard from our president, Giuseppe Tabernero, that there was a very successful session on biosimilars, and we designed that session to get different perspectives from regulators, from practitioners, so medical prescribers and nurses, and also patient advocates, in order to make some clarification about some concepts. Some of them are correct, some of them are less correct, that revolves around biosimilars. And we take the advantage to highlight again what we already have clearly written in our position paper that was published at the early of 2017. And the main message is that those drugs are safe and effective when they are approved following the assessment of the European Medicine Agency. So there is no doubt about that. And we should look at the positive side of the story. That means that when these drugs are properly developed and when they are properly prescribed, are expected to increase the access to biological therapies that nowadays many patients are not receiving because of costs, both in EU and worldwide. So with lowering the cost, these drugs may also contribute globally to the sustainability of healthcare. This is a very important issue. Going into the technicalities of the drugs, we decided to take a very clear position on the basis of data that are published, publicly available, about some of the topics that are discussed more with respect to biosimilars. So the need to have clear information on the labels, because when a prescriber is going to discuss with patient, has to have at hand all information needed to provide the better, the clearer information to patient. The other critical point is the extrapolation on the basis of the totality of evidence that has been submitted for this drug to the regulatory agency. And then there is, of course, the problem of the switching. So going from one drug, for instance, for the reference product to the biosimilars, or the inverse sequence, even though more unlikely, and then the multiple switching from one biosimilars to biosimilar N. There are data on these topics. I think we should look very according to a scientific approach, a scientific method to the data, and if we do so, I think that we can be reassured about the quality of the drugs that we are going to prescribe to our patient. We have been quite firm about the fact that some practice should be avoided, such as the automatic substitution. So, as I said during the session, I am the medical oncologist, I'm prescribing the drug, there is a trust between me and the patient, so this should be respected. There cannot be changed a drug without me or the patient knowing about this. This is very important. And of course, we are talking about the evidence that we have so far, but we should continue to be educated and to educate and to share this information. So in order to build confidence about these drugs and about the prescription of these drugs, I think that we need science. I think that we need guidance from societies. That's the reason why the position paper published by ESMO is really important. And then we need guidance from the European body. And in this context, should be highlighted the effort of the European Commission in partnership with the regulatory agency and the publication of a guide for healthcare professional with respect to the prescription of biosimilars. We need interaction and collaboration with pharmacists at our hospital, with nurses, but also with, again, with regulators and, for instance, national competent authorities. And we are not only the prescribers of these drugs, we are also generating data while we're prescribing the drugs. So we should find a way to collect this data in order to get more information about the performance of the drug. And we should analyze the data in a very scientific and with a very scientific approach. In this context, it is of particular importance the survey that is being conducted by ESMO during this meeting. All attended have received this survey, and this is a 10-minute survey that will allow the society to get more information and to understand if there are gaps that need to be filled and which are these gaps. Thank you.
So if you can join right now us, and now we are open for any questions you may have, any comments on the papers and all the products that we have been commenting here, but also other comments that you may have on public policy. If you can identify yourself at the beginning, sure. Thank you.
Sosha Chisteka, I'm from Medscape Oncology. I have a question for Dr. Enui, sorry if I'm not saying your name. Can you give us some examples of the drugs that are in short supply? Is it chemotherapy? What drugs are they? Thank you.
They're both chemotherapy and hormone therapy medicines. Medicines like tamoxifen, cisplatin, bleomycin. We found this in our snapshot analysis in 2014. What I want to point out is not necessarily some medicines, because that was the data that we had in 2014. The shortages are a moving target. They're changing. Some drugs disappear, they reappear, they disappear. Probably the situation is completely different today, simply because, but as a general rule, the main issue is that these medicines are inexpensive, yet, and the issue is the fact that they are needed to cure cancer. So the fact that they are not available, and for certain drugs there are no replacements, their inexistence in the pharmacy or in the hospital is harming the survival of patients.
Thank you. Please.
Hello, I'm Delia Budurca from Romania, from a medical journal in Romania. And I have a question for Dr. Ennio about countries. Maybe this shortage are more in some countries. Could you give us some examples? And for Dr. Rosa Giuliani about this survey you are applying, you are conducting. What are the topics, and why do you need the need for this survey? Maybe you have some, I don't know, you expect some results, I don't know. Thank you.
First, Alex.
Yes, so again, I would generally say the shortages are more frequent in Central Eastern Europe than in other countries. But all countries have an issue with shortages. And a recent analysis that we've done in 2017 when we went to the European Parliament showed that actually Germany and France and Poland and all the countries have this issue in different magnitudes. However, for what we've seen for cancer, at that time in 2014 when we collected the data, medicines were in short supply, especially in Central European countries, such as Romania, Bulgaria, and other countries.
So I would say that the fact that surveys have been already conducted, that we know a little bit about, the perception of the clinical community on biosimilar, doesn't mean that there is a clear information. And actually, we think that there is a need for a continuous education. So first of all, the survey was designed to test the field and see in this moment, in 2017, before the incoming waves of biosimilar, which is the situation in the medical community. Then it's to raise awareness, of course, and if there is some specific field that will appear to be, less clear, we will be happy to contribute to clarify the gray zone, the gray area. So the survey is quite simple, as I say, short, 10 minutes, and goes from a general introduction, the definition of biosimilar, blah, 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 to the two topics that are going to be more discussed. So the switching, the extrapolation, so more technical information, because those are the hot topics for the next discussion.
Actually, if I may expand on that, basically, ESMO, as mentioned before, it's committed to disseminate the use and promote the use of biosimilars when they are regulatory approved in the right process. And also we are doing actions in collaboration with the regulatory agency, with EMA. We are going to be in 2 weeks in the working group with them, also to promote these actions. We are disseminating this also in other areas. For example, in our annual Congress in Singapore, we have also a session and a forum later on for biosimilars, because biosimilars it's also going to be really very important in those countries. And the way that we want to plan next actions for next years, it's going to be also in part directed by the results of the survey. Sure. Later on.
I'm sorry, I don't know. We are expecting to be these biosimilars lower, with the price lower, and how lower is this new price? Because we are talking about health policy, and then we are talking about medicine too expensive to be in the market. So.
Sorry? May I? Sure. Okay. So, for sure, the price of biosimilar will be lower than that of the reference product. So there is no doubt about that. It is expected, but we do not know yet, of course, but it is expected to be in the range of 30% less. Okay, so this will be. that, considering the cost of the drug, will be a consistent saving.
Perhaps if I may as well, we have seen biosimilars in the field of supportive care in the oncology area, but actually that's why we invited speakers from other areas in the biosimilars formula that we have. For example, our colleagues in the inflammatory bowel diseases or our colleagues in rheumatology have more experience on how these biosimilars have been very rapidly introduced. And this comes in a very important time because actually by next year, and 2018 and also 2019, there will be approval of several biosimilars that are about products that are really very much used in the field of solid tumors. So it's really the right time to make this kind of education and discussion. There is a question right there.
Hello, my name is Ala. I'm from Russia. And actually, I wanted to know which factors might be suggested as the main drivers of drug shortage, and are there any ways to defeat them? Can you just give us some examples to really understand that? Is it clear? I mean, my question.
I think I understood you're asking what are the main causes for medicine shortage?
Yeah, the main drivers for drug shortages, and maybe any ideas how these drivers could be defeated, you know, overcome. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so there are many mechanisms that are implied in drug shortages. There are manufacturing issues. And one example that I can give that I recently heard is that for a specific antibiotic, there was only one factory that was producing that generic antibiotic, and they just had a technical problem, and you know they had to stop production. So that's one of the so manufacturing issues are one of the problems. Unreliable distributors or suppliers is also another cause for having a medicine shortage, because sometimes, and the underlying cause there usually is the lack of incentive of price. These medicines are quite inexpensive. Distributors and producers do not make a lot of profit bringing in these medicines, especially because they are very old and generic. That's why the market is not very favorable. So they simply decide to go out of business or to sell their product, which is being not a very interesting product because of price. It's not produced by many manufacturers, so that's why this happens. Usually it's a combination of these things that actually leads to a current situation in the country. And I think this is quite important. For an extended analysis of what are the solutions to this, I recommend you to go and read the Economist Intelligence Unit's report that we've published on cancer shortages. There are 6 main recommendations that we gave. On a broader scale, I think what is possible, because usually health is a national problem. It is in the EU, it is outside of the EU. Decisions are taken at the national level. Therefore, it is somewhat difficult to tackle this in a global way. However, what we can do is to raise awareness on this, and that's one of your roles here. And to bring this to the attention of the politicians. We've had the honor yesterday to have as a guest Etienne Krug, who's the WHO director for the management of non-communicable diseases. He's basically the one who responds for cancer. And we've had very interesting discussions. They are very much pushing the agenda with the essential medicines list within the context of the cancer resolution that I've mentioned. And I perhaps would like to stress again this important moment that we are living right now, the fact that countries and the WHO are mandated to do things. They have to do things, and they will have to report. And the availability of medicines, of essential medicines, is on that list. So raising awareness and reminding ministries of health that they have to comply with those requirements is something that certainly we can do. And then practical solutions on to how to solve the manufacturing or the distribution problems can be found on the ground.
Any other question? Here in front.
So I wonder if you have any feedback on the biosimilar rituximabs that have already been launched. They've already been launched in Europe. So I wonder if do you have any feedback? Are people using, oncologists using them? Or is it too early?
Yeah, actually, this is one of the biosimilars that right now it's available in some countries. Obviously, this is more in the hematology field, but also used in the rheumatology field. The uptake, interestingly, as it was commented on the session that we had yesterday, depends basically on the discussions that the different stakeholders in each particular country have had about all the aspects of biosimilars. So the presentation that was done yesterday actually showed that there were, for particular drugs in the rheumatology field, there were differences in the uptake, for example, between Sweden and Denmark. And they were related basically on how this, the whole concept of biosimilars was documented, how the physicians were trained, how the patients were also advised about the biosimilars and educated, and the nurses. So that's why on the topic of biosimilar, as well as other areas, we have taken this in a very multidisciplinary approach. Because it's not only the prescribers, it's everyone. All the actors have to be involved. And that was really a very good example. So that's why for next year and the years to come, we are going to have many biosimilars related to the therapeutic area in solid tumors. And this is the approach that we are taking to push and to increase the uptake as much as possible.
Yeah, and if I may, I think that, as you mentioned, there are already biosimilars that are used in other fields, and so it's also interesting for us to learn and to listen about the experience of other colleagues, how they implemented it, how they conveyed the message, what was wrong, what went well, and the message actually that was delivered from the data that we have so far is quite positive. So again, reassurance about the safety and the activity of these drugs.
Any other question? If not, we may conclude. So thank you very much for being here. And if you have additional questions later on, the ESMO press staff will help you to contact us. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you to the speakers.